Welcome to Noon Hour Slides from the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery. We're located on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot, Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We pay our respects to First Nations and Métis ancestors and reaffirm our relationship with one another. We gratefully acknowledge funding from the City of Moose Jaw, SaskArts, SaskCulture, Saskatchewan Lotteries, Canada Council for the Arts, Canadian Heritage, and the Government of Canada. I'm Vincent Hotelling, the administrative assistant here, and I'm here to welcome you to today's presentation. Elaine Stutt is here to talk about Yellowstone National Park. Welcome.
We went to Yellowstone last, Rod, do you know when we went last?
2019, obviously. We went nowhere in 2020.
No, but I mean, it was
October.
October. And we were there the park was closing when we were there. Some of the hotels were closing down. Anyway, we left from Moose Jaw, so here we go. You can see there was a little bit of snow on the ground, but it wasn't that cold. And we saw some deer, herded deer near Rockland. And here we're approaching some mountains. I think we actually stayed overnight someplace in between the two because we never leave too early. And I forget the name of this little town, but it's, I think it's near the opening of the park, and they had a nice barbecue and a little bakery and everything. And who knows if it'd still be open after the pandemic, but it was quite nice. They were there. And there's two ways, once you get in the park, there's two ways. And we went up on this pass, yes, Dan Raven Pass, which goes up to, 8,800 feet. Anyway, it was open when we went in, so we went that way, and it was quite beautiful. And it just snowed. And that's looking down one of the canyons, I'm not sure which. And this, we're at pulled off the road, very pretty. And then going down to the drier parts. And this is all on the, well, I should say, for instance, Yellowstone Park is mostly in Wyoming, but the very northern edge is in Montana. So it's basically the northwest corner of Montana, so the hilly part of Montana. And it's just immediately south of the Alberta-Saskatchewan border, so that north of there is pretty flat, but Yellowstone itself is mountainous, and the Montana region a little bit farther to the west of that is mountainous. Anyway, here we're, I just showed you the pass that we went in, but the next day we went back to see Livingston and for the heritage buildings, and went back in the dry way, the lower way. But you can see down in the lower left corner of the building, a little archway, and that's the traditional entry to the park. It's one way, so if people actually, the road usually goes around it, but if you want to, you can still go through the pretty old archway. And the first, and that's, I believe, in the town of Gardner, which is right at the edge of the park. And the 45th parallel of latitude between the equator and North Pole. So that's where it is, in Yellowstone. And this is Mammoth Springs. Mammoth Springs is a small town right at the edge of the park, and it's also an old military base, but I'll show you parts of that later. But Mammoth Spring, it has a hot springs, and that's a big thing in Yellowstone, is a ton of hot springs, because the park is basically a old volcanic caldera. In fact, if you want to get apocalyptic things, look about super volcanoes and whether the Yellowstone super volcano will ever go off again. But there's a ton of geothermal activity in hot springs, and this is one of them. And this is looking up from the bottom near the city side. And there's elk all over. I think they're coming down to eat the lawns. It was, like I said, late in the year. And by the time we were here, it was late in the day, so that actually the parking lot was already closed off, but you could walk in. So we walked in to see this part of the Mammoth Springs from the top. It was a bit, not bright at all, but just fascinating. If you're ever a photographer, you might warn some of your friends away from these things, because you can spend a ton of time just looking at all the pretty abstract patterns that the salts leave, and just gorgeous. Anyway, where we stayed was at the Canyon Village, and one of the reasons why we stayed there was because we had our dog with us, and one of very few places in the park allowed dogs, but there were these little cabins there that allowed dogs. But being it was the end of the season, they said, "Oh, we upgraded you. Instead, we put you in this lodge." And we said, "I thought the lodge didn't allow dogs." "Oh, it does now." So we were in this lodge instead. And Canyon's Village has an old, well, it's not that old, but from the 60s, a sort of mid-century modern building with lots of river rock and big beams and open spaces inside. And I guess they renovated it to look 60s with all these bright colors and things. And you can even see the Melmac or Formica or whatever it is on the table is in a sort of pattern from the 60s. But there's also a cozy place for people to get by the fireplace. And that one thing about this space is it's a huge space, and it shows that we were there end of the season. It was already snowing, it was cold, and it just made us think, oh, we don't want to be there high season, because there must be a ton of people at high season, because you can see they're prepared for a lot of people. Anyway, one of the advantage of Canyon City is it's right by the Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and we could walk to the canyon from the village, and you could see the river down at the bottom of the canyon. And there's walkways along the edge. Although the dog was quite limited. There was only certain places that the dog could go, and she certainly couldn't go on the steeper paths because she might get in the way of people. You have a nice raven here sitting by the path. Some people, I think they're off the path. And this is there's two falls here. This is the higher fall. And this is from up above looking down. And I walked down the path to see so you could look up the fall. There it was. And later what we did was we did a series of drives. We stayed in Canyon City and we did a series of drives. And here we're driving, I assume, along Yellowstone River. And we saw some geese, as you would expect, and some swans. And we actually had to ask, but these are, if you could just see, those are cygnets, the dusky, they're gray looking swans. But we asked, and they're actually trumpeter swans. There's a group of trumpeter swans that stay resident in Yellowstone all year. And the other thing, of course, are buffalo. We were there spring once, and we saw a lot of buffalo quite close to Old Faithful Lodge. In this case, most of the buffalo, there were some close, some far. These were fairly far from the road, but a fair amount of them. And the other thing is road maintenance. Road maintenance, when you're dealing with geysers and geothermal activity, you see that the people keep having to put barriers around the new hotspots because it keeps changing. So you never know what's going to be. And these two guys, these ravens, were definitely begging. They were at a viewing spot, and somebody, not me, I don't feed wildlife, but somebody fed this one a French fry. Definitely begging. And this is some geothermal springs. There was one called, I believe it's the Breathing Dragon Spring. That's that walkway where the people are standing is so they can get a close look at this, and you can see the steam going up. It's a spring that keeps pushing out this because of this breathing sound, and see that in a minute. But they also had was some mud holes, and this was boiling from the center. Just, I wish I could show you the. We did take some little videos of it, but to do a video, I'd have to go back and forth. It would get complicated. But it bubbling mud, and this is this dragon hole, and again, it would just this heavy whooshing breathing sound. And you can see it's not, it was raining, sleeting that day. Not too cold. I mean, it was fine. And this is a little mud hole. And these, we did see some birds. These are, I believe, Audubon warblers. You can see them at the base of the tree there. And this one's looking straight at the camera. And I'm using both Rod's pictures and my pictures. This, I believe, was one of Rod's shots. Sometimes we're taking the same thing and sometimes we're taken differently. He takes more pictures of buildings. And sometimes one of us forgets the camera and grabs the other camera. Here, let me take it. No, you take it. I'll take it. Anyway, so there's some of Rod's pictures, some mine. And this is, I believe, near the fishing bridge, near the Lake Yellowstone. And they had a little nature museum, which was good because I could ask the attendant about the birds I saw. And he said, yes, it was a trumpeter swan. And yeah, looks like an Audubon warbler. So this is a trumpeter swan. And it's a nice old building, one of their kind of historical rustic looking buildings. And they had a big map of Yellowstone Lake. And you can see the, at the lower left, you can see the Continental Divide. And Yellowstone is, and the Continental Divide kind of winds around the west side of Yellowstone. So the west part of Yellowstone, most of the park and the Yellowstone River are in the Missouri River drainage, and the Yellowstone flows north up to near the border, near the Canadian border. Well, not that near, but you know, to like Wolf Point or whatever is where and then it flows down in the Missouri and down to the Mississippi. But with this Continental Divide here, this part of flows to the Snake River and then up to the Columbia and out to the Pacific. Okay. Oh, and we were trying to, I'm a bit of a bird watcher, and we were trying to catch some little, I think it was a sparrow or something that was hopping around, and we never really caught a good picture of it, but suddenly Rod turned and there was a mountain bluebird. And this is at the Yellowstone Lake Resort. There's 3 resorts there, and there's obviously the Old Faithful Resort, one of the old fancy ones I'll show you later, and this is the Yellowstone Lake Resort, and the one we were at was the Canyon City, and it's the newest one, although I think they may have torn down some of the older buildings. But this is one of their big buses, and this the Lake Resort was kind of the more elegant one, but it also had elk all over the lawn. We had the dining room had a good view of the lake, and it was this was the more expensive restaurant of the group. Oh, I don't know that anything's cheap, but the nice thing about these resorts is they try and make them like old style resorts. Like in our hotel, there was no TV, and if you wanted wireless, you had to go to the lodge. So it was different. So in this Yellowstone Lake Resort or lodge, they had a piano in the lobby and a woman playing it, and people were sitting and reading books and playing games. And here they're all crowded at the window to look at the elk. But you can see they're just reading and having wine. And so it's a nice convivial atmosphere of the way hotels used to be when there were lobbies and things. But it was a pretty sunset, and you could see the moon and whatnot. And the next day, we took another drive, and this is looking down from Gibbons Fall, and I'm guessing we may be looking at Snake River drainage here. Oh no, I don't. Who knows? but this is Gibbons Fall, and they had like I said, they're really expecting to have a lot of people. So it was, you know, parking lot and ramps, and it was nicely landscaped with wildflowers. And here you can see some roses and rose hips and some nice lichen and moss. But here we're getting around so we can see the fall and the Gibbons Fall. Then we went along the river, and we ended up going, as I mentioned, pathways we didn't go on any because we hikes because you can't with a dog. But we did go into picnic areas because you could take the dog in the picnic areas. A lot of the picnic areas were closed, but it didn't matter. We just park and walk in, and some of them are quite nice. I think we're actually at a picnic area here. The other thing about hiking is they really warn you about bears. They warn you about bears all over. Basically, they want you, unless you're on the roadway, they want you to have bear spray and preferably be in groups of at least 3. So they want the bears to think of humans that they taste nasty like bear spray. So a lot of warnings. So we didn't know hiking, but there was plenty to see for what we did, but we were limited having the dog there. If you ever want to take hikes, don't bring a dog. And here's another swan in the water. At this point, we were doing 2 loop trails, small loop trails. One was a very pretty trail along a canyon, and the other was in a bunch of small geysers and thermal activity. And we saw from a distance a coyote or coyote. And here you can see the mountains in the background and this little tower that's been built up from the thermal salts. Like I said, it's a loop, so we're driving around to get there. And there's bison. And this is cute. It says, you know, there's Old Faithful. This is Young Hopeful Geyser. You can see it's not too big, although some of them had signs like this will, are they called erupt? This will spray every 24 hours, every 30, you know, but none in that area were going when we were there, except for that small one like that. And you can see there's a big, big hole in the center there that's steaming. It was, the steam made it difficult to see. There were some spots where they'd shown, oh, beautiful pictures, but we were there at the time of the year we were there. Some places you were just covered in steam and you couldn't see anything. You'll see a little later in this, we had a lot of steam. And it was pleasant. I mean, it was warmer in the steam, and then there was a little bit of sulfur smell, but not much. And there in the background, you could see that tower. We walked around. There you can see where you're getting totally hidden by the steam. And some bison. And this is with a telephoto from the road, from the car probably. Well, I don't know if we're in the car yet, but we made a point of not getting near them. And they weren't interested in us at that point. And now we're in for the big geysers. This is near the Old Faithful Lodge, where the Old Faithful geyser is, and several other geysers. And we're here late in the day. Part of the reason why we're here later in the day is we were going to these restaurants, so we had to get reservations, and we hadn't done that early enough, so our reservations were all quite late in the day. So we arrived and looked around a bit, and here's the Old Faithful Lodge, and it's one of these big old-fashioned fantasy lodge, and you can see the huge chimney and a huge roof. It looks like they have a viewing platform up there. I don't know if it's open or not, but anyway, like I said, it's fantasy. They use a lot of wood and stone, and a beautiful deck that in the summer would have a little ice cream bar or something, but it's of course pretty deserted right now. And this is the big old interior. And like I said, it's fantasy. It's built with I don't know how they got so many trees of those bendy types, but they did. See a huge lobby, and it is part of the hotel, so that the residential wings go off from here. But again, it's the old idea of a lodge where people just sit around in the lobby and talk, and they had a violinist playing on one of the balconies too. You can see a huge fireplace, and if you look at the top of it, you can see those circle of it's a big clock with two long things hanging down. And people would sit there and warm themselves by the fire. And this is looking down at the restaurant that we're going to eat at later. But first we go back outside to see Old Faithful, and they have a schedule. And Old Faithful is still going off. It's not as strong, or it doesn't go off as often as it used to be, but still there. All the people gathered up. You can see everybody's got their winter coats on. And it did erupt with great steam sounds. Like I said, I have a video, but I can see that. And the dog could not get that far. She was restricted. There's a no dog sign there. But after we saw the geyser, we got her out for a walk. So we walked all around the site, but no farther than this for the geysers. And then after we walked her and put her in the warmed up car, we went to the restaurant. And it was interesting. It had copper plate on the menu. They used to have, and they still do have a budget for the national art and the national parks. And this was interesting. It was near the bar. It's a etched glass pelican. And you can see in the background, there's some bears or something with hats on. So a little fantasy etched glass panel. And that was the bar as well. I'm not sure if they serve food in the bar or not, but a good place to warm up at this time of year. But we were there on the last night. This was the last night for this hotel. It was going to be shut the next day. We were talking to the waitress, and she said, "Yep, I'm finished as of tonight." Said some of the rest of the staff have a half day the next day, but it was just closing down. And then they actually open up again at Christmas, and they have snow sports, and people are they move people around by bus or ski-doo things or whatever. And here we are back at the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, because that's where we're staying. And you can see the multicolored rocks there. It's really pretty. And some lichen in the ground with the pine needles. Some more lichen and moss. Yeah, there was a very pretty walkway in the woods between the Canyon City and the canyon wall, and we were assuming that you didn't have to have bear spray for that area that was so close, but maybe you should have. And this is the in the Canyon City. This is actually a little museum there, which was interesting. We went to that one day, and they had beside the museum, they had a store, kind of outfitter store, plus food and snacks, and they had the main dining room, which also had a gift store and a big parking lot. And this is either the at our own lodge or at the main lodge. And Rod would frequently go to the main lodge to use the internet, the wireless. But then we went out for a drive, more elk. Just a lot of pretty scenery. More bison. And You can see some people are maybe getting better shots because they're getting out of their car, but not likely to do that myself. Although, you know, certainly on some of the walkways near the geysers, and one time we were there early spring and there were bison quite close to the Old Faithful Lodge. I mean, right next to it. So sometimes you get fairly close to them, but it's not a good idea. And we saw given we're driving on the same road, we saw the same family of swans again. And this is getting towards, I think we spent the morning back at the Canyon City at the museum or whatnot. So, and it's a vacation after all. We don't have to be too busy every day. And this is Silver Top Peak. It's about 10,000 feet tall. But this is, we're at Fisherman's Bridge or Fisher's Bridge. And it is right near the Yellowstone Lake, and actually near Lake Yellowstone Lodge. But we were there late for the sunset, basically. And Rod and I in 2 different places with 2 different cameras. He went up a bank, which I wasn't going to do with the dog because she's pulled me down banks before. And this is the Fisher's Bridge. Nice old wood structure. So this is me taking pictures from the bridge. Lovely cloud formations. I love the shadows and the ripples on the water. And this is Rod with a different camera. He was getting the really bright colors. I think he also had a nice night setting on his camera. But this was, I think it was a little goldeneye. We've been watching it before. And one thing about diving ducks is they're hard to catch a picture of because they dive. And then where are they? Where are they? But anyway, and this one just loved to be in this picture of a sunset. And a very pretty sunset. Okay, this is, I think this is our last day, and we did, what we are now is the lodge was on the north side of Canyon City, is on the north side of the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. Here we're on the south side. And again, a big parking lot and a lot of trails. And there's 2 falls. So I guess we would have it driven. Later we'll show you the smaller falls, which is back behind where we're looking now. Again, more of the beautiful colored rock. And this is the lower falls. And if you look at the top, you can see the bridge above it. And the red squirrel. And here you're looking down the canyon back towards the bigger fall. And there's on the north side, there's an outlook that we never went to that's right above the falls. But you could see it from this side, but we couldn't get a clear picture. Up, and there's a bit of a chipmunk. Like I said, it was late fall, so they were making sure they had enough seed stored. Some elk, and now we're heading out. And as you know, any place in summer, you've got road construction. So they were getting a little road construction or clearing something away. And at this point, they'd had some snow, so that the road that we came in, the higher pass, the Dan Raven Pass, was already closed. And here's a big just everywhere there were these sort of sites of geothermic interest or devastation, whereas, you know, and I don't know if this is where a hill overcame trees or trees are trying to overcome the geothermal. Okay, and then we went to the Sheep Eater Cliff, which is, and I'll read it, it says, this cliff were named for the Shoshone Indians who lived throughout this mountainous region. Their use of bighorn sheep earned them the name Tukadika, or sheep eaters. The cliff is basalt lava that formed columnar joints when it cooled nearly 500,000 years ago. And there were other people there. And at first I thought, oh, why don't they get out of the way? But then I realized, oh, their scale, their activity. I climbed a little way up, but that would certainly be an easy way to break your ankle or something on that. Very beautiful. Treat for geologists. And a stream ran past it. You could look down and see more of it down below. And we're driving out. Some lovely big cliffs. And now we're going back to the same Mammoth Springs that we saw before, but as I mentioned, we were there late afternoon, early evening, and the parking lot was already closed, and there was a loop road that you can drive. So we saw a little bit more than we had before. And the path was covered with junipers. So I got some berry pictures. And these salt springs are, geothermal springs are fascinating because there's all sorts of things that happen on them. That little bit of white rock there looks very light to me, like it's, you know, just a accretion of salts in funny pattern. And again, they're addictive. You want to take so many pictures. Very pretty pastel-y colors. And all sorts of different things. I think this is actually a combination, like that it's far enough away from a vent that it's hot, but it's not too hot, that some strange form of algae can manage to grow there, and the algae gets covered with salt. So it's an algae salt combination. Not sure. I know I read up about it, but funny thing is the way I put these things together, I'll probably look it up and tomorrow I'd be able to tell you exactly what this is. But today I'm not sure, but it's really pretty. And it's actually mobile at this point. You can see it dried by the side, but this was still, you could see it swaying a bit in the water. And this, I think Rod took. Rod had a slightly different setting on his camera. He was getting the really bright colors on this. And you can see the pathways, and the pathways, some ways are, you can see they've slumped into the water, and you wonder, I guess wood is better for salt than most things. This is called the wedding cake fall or something, but a really interesting. You can see some algae grows in it as well. But it's largely really white. And you can look down there, that's probably part of Mammoth Springs, the town site down below there. And we weren't the only one taking a lot of pictures. But you can see also that walkway, you could see that it's slumped down into the water. And these springs, hot springs, are dangerous. People do get scalded, and there's signs all over saying, stay on the pathway, don't go off the pathway, very dangerous. And then we went drove around this section, and there was one of these I don't know what you call it, tower or something, but you can see some hot water bubbling out of it at the top at the left. To some extent, you eventually get tired of seeing this much salt springs, but it's interesting. And the sign says dangerous ground. And you can see that the hot spring has already taken over the part of the parking lot where they put the sign that said dangerous ground. And now we're leaving, and this is the town of Mammoth Springs. And the thing of what they do is they get a lot of elk. So we took a lot of elk pictures right here. This one we were waiting for it to cross the road. I think it was a doe with twins. And they like the lawns. You can see it's sagebrush at the edge of town, but the Park Service has lawns and they come down and eat the lawns. And they're all over the town. And I'm sitting in the car. Rod was taking some pictures from the sidewalk, but also because he was interested that the town of Mammoth Springs was a fort at one point, and they have a lot of heritage information about the actual fort and the buildings, who was there when. I'm not sure if, like, are they inhabited by the Park Service or what? I'm not sure if some of these are private houses, but there, and that's the clearest picture. That's a shot Rod got. Beautiful doe. And then we're driving out towards Gardner, and here you can see a flock of pronghorn on the other side of the road. And that's a super zoom. And then we saw this little young buck elk with his little spiky horns. They're interacting in some way. And this is the town of Gardner, which is right on the edge of the park, which has the old stone arch. But I saw driving in there once, I was looking, and there was an elk. And the houses, most of the residential houses have fences, and you can see the elk was just leaning its head over the fence and eating a bush on the other side of the fence. So people get used to dealing with elk there, but this is Gardner, and you can see the G up on the. So here we're leaving, but it's still beautiful. It was getting towards sunset, and as tempted, I took a ton of pictures out the car window. I'm only showing you 2. But it was just that whole valley leaving Yellowstone is beautiful. And we stayed overnight in Livingston and snow. So our timing was beautiful. We got the heavy snowstorm just after we had left Yellowstone. And so we stayed had a snow day in Livingston, which is fine. Livingston we were in before. It has a lot of heritage houses, buildings, and nice, formerly it was the train access to Yellowstone. And a nice old town, and some good restaurants. And there's also a path that we walked before, so we slogged through part of it this time with the fresh snow. It was very pretty in the snow, and there was a deer. And we saw a bald eagle, but didn't get a shot of it. And then we went out to one of their nice restaurants. And you can see, again, they're all prepared for summer, but it wasn't summer. And so the next day we left, and this is heading out. Okay. Yeah, like I said, we were there in October, right when they were closing it down. We drove up.
Good time.
Yeah, way fewer people, although it was a little cold sometimes. And we drove back up and visited a glacier, but mostly everything was closed down there as well.
Elaine, was there any places where you could go in the hot springs?
Could go what?
Swimming.
You mean like swimming or
Oh.
something?
I think there was one place somewhere that I saw something, but generally not.
The temperature is way too high. They're more concerned about people falling in and, fatally. because of the temperatures.
Nothing like Banff where they have sections where they have it.
I didn't notice any, but
designated,
again, in
you know, that's
October,
bad.
they might have just been
Mhm.
closed.
I saw one notice that was in a stream about something, maybe, but generally, yeah, he's right. There's not a lot of spas or anything.